Hello, welcome everybody to another B-Sides Villages talk. Happy to be having this year and looking forward to many more. I'd like to introduce Alexis Hancock, Director of Engineering at EFF. She's going to be talking to us today about HSMs. And want to give a quick shout out and thanks to EFF for being always a wonderful partner here with B-Sides and just a great village to attend. So please, thank you very much, Alexis.
All right. I guess I have to talk a little loud. It's all good. So, as he said, I'm Alexis Hancock, Director of Engineering, primarily over the web encryption projects at my job. EFF has several open source projects. In particular, I manage the CertBot project. And I kind of want to take you all a little journey, on a little journey around what it looks like to kind of like integrate security into an open source project and kind of follow best practices while coming across a lot of barriers to that. And I will just get started. So yes, open source and security has had a rough road. We all kind of know about the Heartbleed bug that happened with OpenSSL, and the government has been highlighting certain things around open source and the prioritization of security. But a lot of open source projects have actually paved the way for security. So there's, kind of like a two-edged sword with that, where you had a large collaboration of people come together and try to push the envelope when it came to security standards. And also, I want to highlight the lack of investment in open source, the lack of investment in the people behind open source. There's real people coding behind like all these wonderful tools, and burnout happens, lack of funding, all of that contributed to the lack of security in the open source ecosystem. This kind of sucks giving a talk next to a lunch, but it's okay. So I wanted to highlight that. I think everybody's kind of like familiar with the meme around that one guy in Nebraska taking care of a project. That shouldn't be a thing going forward, in my opinion. It should be a more supported effort. Let's go forward and try to create projects that are well supported, that have a lot of investment from the ecosystem that uses it, right? So I don't want to keep hearing about, this one person that had like actually contributed to like one project, because you're depending on not only a single source of failure, but just a single person who can only do but so much. And I also want to preface, code signing does not prevent malware or malware installs, but code signing does help an integrity chain behind it. So today I'll take you on a particular journey of getting trust on Windows through code signing, obtaining a code signing certificate, talking to e-token, HSMs, and smart cards, signing with an e-token, and attestation and code signing ecosystem at large. So my problem for our project was I needed easy distribution among a small team. I needed cost efficiency. I needed low cost barriers. And I needed compatible with our modern release pipeline as a team. So I was very naive to think I could just have that up front. So I want to talk to you all about kind of like the challenges and barriers that I came across when trying to get trust. Obtaining a code signing certificate. Some of you may be familiar with this process, where the model that we were coming across was we're a publicly distributed software, and we need to be trusted on a major platform from several users, right? Thousands of users, millions of servers. So coming with that model, we needed to be publicly trusted through another entity. And so in particular with Windows, there's something called the user access control system that you have to bypass in order to be a trusted software. You might see it pop up when you install, some sort of like software or installer of some sort on Windows, and it will pop up saying this is trusted by this publisher or not trusted. Do you want to proceed? So we wanted to get that trust on Windows so we could, follow certain guidelines available. But there was two different issues on this particular platform. There's EV code signing certificates, which are way more money than regular code signing certificates. But the trade-off is EV certificates, which are about, I want to say at minimum 300. That may be a laughable number. They're probably more than that, but a couple $100. And keep in mind, this is an open source project, not a private company. So EV is immediately trusted, or extended validation certificates are immediately trusted on Windows. So you get immediate reputation. With regular code signing certificates, you get trust over time. No one's really quite sure of the exact formula that goes into getting code signing trust with a regular certificate on Windows, but everyone's pretty sure that's dealt with the ecosystem, and even Microsoft kind of halfway confirmed this, that it's like number of installs over time that's been successful, and then you can gain reputation and trust on Windows that way. But the trust will not be immediate. The reason why they have immediate trust on extended validation certificates is because of the fact that they do like an extensive background check process for that certificate. But then there's little caveats because they do some background testing and checking for regular code signing certificates as well. But, I digress. So had to choose a certificate authority. A certificate authority, if you may or may not know, like there's a couple out there that actually do work with Windows or are trusted by Windows as a issuer of code signing certificates. They're very easy to find. You have Sectigo, DigiCert, or DigiTrust, and then you have several others as well. So they vet you as a person, as an organization first, and you get phone calls, automated checks, things of that nature. You have to submit business documents. And then finally, maybe like a week or two later, you get your EV certificate. So I got it. Cool, right? And then I got the HSM, or the smart card, with the certificate on it in a plain white envelope in the mail with no documentation, with no other instructions besides get a PIN code and good luck. I wasn't quite sure what I just received in the mail, considering I wasn't quite familiar with this ecosystem of code signing and trust and what exactly all of this meant. It just looked like a USB token. It just looked like a USB drive. So for all I know, I just got a regular USB drive in the mail from Sectigo or DigiTrust or whichever CA you choose, right? So these USB devices I'll interchange the term e-token, HSM smart cards, even though there can be some variants there, but all of them have to be FIPS 140-2 compliant. What's that? Nobody. FIPS is a federal information processing standard. Why does that apply to this? Because they use this NIST standard for these smart cards in particular. So in June 2023, all code signing certificates, as by the CAB Forum, as voted by them last year, all code signing certificates have to come on these devices. So June's right around the corner. So they all have to be generated and stored on 140-2 FIPS compliant devices. So if you do get a code signing certificate in the future, you will have to deal with these devices. So the token that we got was really interesting because it said SafeNet on the token body, but the actual connector piece said Gemalto, and I was really confused because the documentation said SafeNet, and I was just like, what the hell is going on? So I had to find out that Thales was the vendor that issued the USB, because once again, I got this in a plain white envelope, no other documentation, didn't know what the hell was going on. Thales acquired Gemalto. Gemalto acquired SafeNet. So if you see those three names, they're all the same damn company. So whose fault is this, like, with this confusion that initially occurred? I mainly blame them. I blame the USB vendor, and I blame the CA for out-of-date documentation on their sites. It took some time to go on the CA site and find the proper tools to talk to the token, because they provided me initially rules and instructions to go use the GUI for this token. But as developers with different types of pipelines at play, we don't necessarily use GUIs to do that. We use the CLI. We need CLI tools for this. It didn't readily provide that. I had to dig for a long time. Solution modeled for a single developer deploying on the same machine that they develop on is kind of like the approach they took. When I have a team, I need a team of people who are trusted to code sign. How do I distribute this among them? This is just treating it as if I'm the only person working on this project with my singular machine, which is probably how code signing certificates get on the loose anyway and sign malware, but and it's a mix of me and my own experience. I didn't know how to talk to cryptographic tokens and smart cards in depth. And this is why I'm sharing with you now, in case you come across this in the future yourself and wish someone had told you. Talking to the token, you have OpenSE. Is a open source suite of tools to talk to cryptographic tokens. They implement two different standards. There's PKCS11 and PKCS15 is the data format. PKCS11 is the API. You'll also see PKCS11 called CryptoKey. CryptoKey meaning cryptographic token interface. Sorry for all the alphabet soup. But there's PKCS set of standards that are like 1 through 15. I will only be talking primarily about PKCS11 and the API to talk to these tokens. And when you have these kind of standards floating around with these smart cards, some of the smart cards may be PKCS11 compatible, but the module provided to talk to it may not actually be compatible with with OpenSC, even though it's open source. So sorry if you come across that sometimes, but it does happen. PKCS15 is a data format for the smart card that may not necessarily be compatible either with OpenSC or even have PKCS11 proper support. I'm sorry. That's just kind of the state of things right now. But if you know these standards and how to talk to them, you can kind of work with the tools that you're given, and eventually you'll be able to talk to the tools with either tools that the CA will give you, like they gave me proprietary CLE tools to talk to the token that they issued, or I could use OpenSC, which was thankfully compatible with the token that I was issued. So make sure you talk to the CA, like, what are you issuing here? And make sure you're not like me where I get it in a plain white envelope and then figure out what does it support and what's on it and what modules are able to talk to it. Signing with the token. So we had to use our own infrastructure for this. Authenticode signatures are something that are Windows format code signing signature. The challenge right now is the pipeline and tooling that we mainly develop on are mostly Nix-based machines, and you have to sign, in particular, for some reason, on a Windows machine with Sign Tool, which is a exe sign tool. So no one at my job develops on Windows. I don't know about y'all. I mean, you could strike up a cloud container or two, but then it's outside of your pipeline for your CI. See where I'm going with this? So there's open source tools to help play with this. So you have JSign. Some angels out there made JSign and OSSO sign code that are out-of-band tools that can implement an authenticode signature when you want to talk to the token. And they support different key stores. So if you have a YubiKey or you have some different type of key store that supports PKCS11, you can use these tools to talk to the token to sign. Remember that the timestamp that you do utilize in a signature counts as a counter signature. So if you mess up the call to the timestamp server that the CA provides, it can mess up the digital signature for the entire piece of software. So I had to learn that the hard way when I had to like a bad call to a parameter for 256 hash, and it came back saying the digital signature was wrong, and I was like, what do you mean? And then I found out I had messed up the call to the timestamp server. CAs do provide some cloud services, like SSL.com provides like a e-signer service of some sorts, but I don't really like that direction because once again, you have to pay for it monthly or by sign, I forget. But it's just, these are things that can happen for free, and these are things that can be utilized if, the ecosystem was stronger around that. So I don't necessarily support the CA-based tools, but they do exist if you just don't want to do any of that with your own infrastructure and just want to utilize the e-signer that they have with their cloud infrastructure. What can make this all easier? Attestation. So you'll have your own, say, a YubiKey, and you can attest to the certificate originally with that YubiKey and attest that there's a private key that's been generated and stored on that device, and they'll send you the intermediate and the cross-signing certificate to install on your YubiKey, and you can distribute among your team with attested YubiKeys. The YubiKeys do have to be FIPS compliant. Thankfully, YubiCo provides FIPS compliant keys. So that's an opportunity there to actually expand among the ecosystem. Say you have 3 developers on your team, you can have them all have FIPS keys, attest to the certificate, and you all can sign that way. It's easier to revoke like a physical key from that person than it is to revoke people from a system that is a singular, centralized system that everybody knows the PIN code, and they leave the company and they may know the PIN code, and that can get messy. So I find it better for auditing and management of code signers. The code signing ecosystem, I only talked about Windows here, but there's other opportunities of code signing that occur and happen. PGB keys and UB keys and smart cards. You can like make an internal system where you upload a pub key to an internal system possibly, and have like internal PKI management with that. Digital signature slot on YubiKey. I'm sorry, I'm like really YubiKey heavy. There are other smart cards like Nitro Key and all that. I just primarily worked with YubiKey. Slot 9C on YubiKey. You can use that for singular use or internal projects for PKI. And we use actually on CertBot PGB keys to sign some of our packages for Debian. So that's been something that's been really, really helpful, having open PGB keys on YubiKeys distributed among our developers who are all remote. And then there's SigStore, which is a new project, I think, out of the Linux Foundation. They support something called ephemeral keys, and they do use OIDC or Open Identity Connect for identity purposes, which may cause some issue here and there with some people, depending on your threat model and how sound you find that solution. But I do like their idea of ephemeral keys because code signing certificates, they last like a year or two. It's really long-term certificates in the ecosystem. TLS certificates normally get issued for like 90 days at a time now, or at least that's what's being proposed as a better TLS ecosystem for putting out TLS certificates. And so that every 90-day span versus the EV and regular code signing certificates that are issued like once, and they expire in a year or 3, that's really long-term and an easy chance for something to slip and keys to get, actually leaked in some sort of manner because of that long-term presence of that code signing certificate. So I do like their idea of ephemeral keys. And just 2 days ago, SigStore now supports NPM, signing NPM packages in beta. So check it out. And then I talked to the director of engineering over there. There is like little whispers around trying to get a chain of trust on the Windows, not with Windows Authentico, but on the Windows ecosystem and PyPy packages. Signing SigStore with that. SigStore, check it out. There's a whole like different sets of like tools that they use. They have their own CA, internal monitoring and logs. It's very nice stuff. Signing mobile applications have their own ecosystem. I didn't focus on this as much, but I do know like with iOS, there's Xcode, and some of these things could be actually implemented to be a little bit more open. There's different tools. So I didn't focus on it as much, but there is code signing for, APKs and different like iOS packages and apps. My requests and wishes of this ecosystem is better support from certificate authorities when it comes to code signing. There is the PKI consortium. They actually have like a GitHub, an open repo if you have like any issues that you've had over time to go express that in their discussions panel on GitHub. And then there's the CA browser forum that also has done their due diligence and actually passed a standard that goes into effect in June around not only getting code signing certificates supported and stored on 140-2 compliant keys, but you can actually use cloud HSMs now with this new mandate. You can attest to a cloud HSM. You can, unfortunately, they don't have attestation readily available. I think only Google Cloud right now has attestation available. The other two need to catch up, but there is more talk around remote attestation in particular. So you can use cloud HSMs now with the new mandate. It's a little bit more looser. Just as long as you have a 140-2 compliant key, they'll allow you to attest. So let's focus also on proprietary cloud signing, more on distributed signing. I support attestation in that way because you can distribute among a team safely. And the important part is the private key never leaves the device. You can't export the key and you can't put it anywhere else. It stays on the device unless someone out there hacked YubiKey, you're getting paid. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of like, in this case, we know of that the private key will stay on the device. And now that the cryptographic standards are the same for code signing, regular certificates and EV certificates, I honestly don't see the benefit of an EV certificate over a regular code signing certificate now because the cryptographic standards are the same, especially as of June. So I'm not quite sure, outside of like background checks, how beneficial EV over regular can be in the future. Past June, I would just probably tell most open source projects to just utilize regular code signing certificates. In my opinion, accessible security is better security, especially for open source projects like mine. And I would much rather we go towards a stronger ecosystem rather than creating proprietary tools down the road that will just make code signing even harder. System plugs. Pivot is a Cash App-based open source project that I contributed to that actually you can manage some X509 certificates on YubiKey. Actually added additional slots with my contribution. So go play with that if you want. It's not set in stone, but it's a project that I thought was pretty useful for talking to YubiKeys. And if you want to kind of see what it looks like to sign with a smart card, I did create like a shell script to kind of see what that looks like, particularly with EC, elliptic curve, ECC certificates, and seeing how that can look. It's a really short shell script of sorts. So it's something that I played with, like especially if you want to like build your own internal PKI and want to see how the actual signing mechanisms work on a YubiKey. And they also have their own docs on the site too on YubiCode. They're pretty good dev docs. Thank you for listening. Any questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about ephemeral code signing certs? I was under the impression that this signature would only be valid as long as the signing certificate was valid.
So the way SigStore set it up, if I understand your question correctly, is that they have different mechanisms. They have their own internal CA, right, that they have that issues these ephemeral keys that are mostly, I would say, kind of like a key store ring situation where the base key gets rotated, but then there's a chain that gets connected over time, which is why they have the monitoring and logs. Hopefully the director of engineering from SigStore doesn't get mad at me and I'm like misinterpreting what he said, but that's what I understand. As far as like being valid, as long as the signature is valid, I think they have it where there's like a permanent log of that and they check against that versus having the code signing certificate long standing. So making sure there's a record of it and having that there and solidified into kind of like mimicking CT logs to an extent. And kind of like having that chain of trust going back to the original code signing certificate that did, lose its, I would say, permeance in the system. Hopefully that answered the question. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah.